This video is going to be a guide for Excel functions, what they are and how to use them. The purpose of a function is to take an input, or often multiple inputs, and apply an algorithm to them to produce an output. They take the format equals, function name, open brackets, and then enclosed within your brackets are your inputs, and then you round off the brackets. Microsoft Excel has hundreds of different functions. A full list of them can be found here in the Microsoft support page for them, where it lists all of the functions alphabetically. If we scroll down, you'll see there are quite a lot of them. This is a really useful page for finding a particular function that you might be looking for, so I'll leave a link to it down in the description beneath the video. But now back to our Excel sheet. For those of you that are new to Microsoft Excel functions, your best bet for using functions is going to be this, the Insert Function button at the top of the Excel sheet, next to the formula bar. This brings up the Insert Function window, and at the top you'll see you can search for a function. You can type in the name of a function if you know it, or alternatively a description of what you want the function to do. Click Go, and it will bring back a list of functions that it thinks could be useful for you. Alternatively, you can search by category. In this case, it defaults to most recently used, but you could search for, say, maths functions, search for other types of functions, statistics functions, averages, and the like. But I'm just going to return it to most recently used. You'll see I've got the power function, the if function, and a few more functions that I've used recently. In this case, I'm going to use the power function for our demonstration and click OK. Doing this brings up the function arguments window, and you'll see two text fields, one text field for each of the two inputs that the power function has. If we click on a text field, it brings up a description. So it tells you what the input is and what value it will accept. In this case, it will take any real number as an input. And likewise, the second input also brings up a description of what it does. I'll now add some values to each of the inputs. I'll start with 2 for the number and 3 as the power. So 2 is being raised to the power of 3. And as you see, it's given us our result down here. So 8. If we click OK, you'll see our result, the 8, is now in the cell that we had selected. And our formula is up here at the top in the formula bar. If we wanted to, we could alter our inputs. So instead of just doing 2 to the power of 3, I could change it up here in the formula bar. So it's now 3 to the power of 3. If I hit return, it now outputs a value of 27. 3 to the power of 3 is 27. But it's not just numbers in their pure form that we can add as inputs. We can also do other cells. For example, if I do a 2 in cell D1 followed by a 3, I can address these two cells from within my power function, and I do so as follows: D1, D2. You'll see it's highlighted the two cells that I'm putting as my inputs. It's even color coded them for us. So D1 in blue here, you'll see D1 is in blue up here. If I hit return, we now once again get a value of 8. I mentioned earlier that functions take inputs, but there are some exceptions to this. One is the pi function. The pi function doesn't take any inputs whatsoever. All it does is output a value equal to pi. So it is a zero input function. If I hit return on this empty function, you'll see it outputs the value of pi, 3.1415, etc. Because the pi function is such a simple function, it makes it perfect for demonstrating the next feature. Functions can also accept other functions as inputs. The way it does this is the output of one function feeds into the input of a second. I'm going to demonstrate this using my power function with a pi function nested inside of it. So if I raise 2 to the power of pi, what do we get? You get 8.82 and so on. So 2 has been raised to the power of pi. And then the 8.82 is a number in and of itself, which if we wanted to, we could feed into an input of a third function, and we could keep nesting functions deeper and deeper within further functions to create some very complicated formulas if we wanted to. But I think that would be a little bit excessive, so instead I'm just going to jump to the next feature, which is how to add ranges of cells as inputs to functions. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the sum function. What the sum function does is it takes multiple inputs, adds them together, and outputs the value equal to the sum of its constituent inputs. I'll demonstrate this first using our D1 and D2 cells that we had earlier. So 2 plus 3 gives us a value of 5. But what happens if we keep adding cells? So 4, 5, 6. We now have 5 cells in a row. Is there an easy way we could add all 5 of those cells? If I wanted to, I could just continue going D3, D4, D5, and that absolutely would work. But is there an easier way of adding all 5 of those cells to this function? What you may notice about each of these cells is that they all exist in the same column and they are in adjacent rows, which means that it's very easy for us to identify the 5 cells by highlighting over them, and we see it's given us our data range ranging from D1 to D5, highlighted in blue here. If I hit return on that, it gives us our value of 20, so it's added all 5 of those cells together. What we have here is a one-dimensional range, but if we wanted to, we could increase it to a two-dimensional range. For example, if I had more values in the E column, let's just add a load of 2's together. Can we alter our inputs? So instead of just going from D1 to D5, can we also include the E column? Well, yes, we can. We just notice that instead of going from D1 to D5, what we want is to go from D1 to E5. So I'll change that now, and it's highlighted all 10 of our values. And if we return on that, we now have a value of 30. Now, I'm sure you're all very capable of adding these 10 rather small numbers together in your head quite easily, to be honest. But what happens if there are hundreds of numbers or even thousands of numbers? I'm sure you can appreciate that this is where data ranges become very useful for handling large numbers of cells containing data all at once. So far, this video has focused entirely on functions which take numbers as inputs and output another number. Are there other functions which take different types of data as inputs and outputs? Yes, there are. And in fact, those of you who know a little bit about functions and were paying attention at the start may have noticed that we actually used one earlier, the hyperlink function. The hyperlink function takes 2 inputs. The first is the URL, which is a text string. You'll see it's encased within quotation marks here. And similarly, the second input here is also encased within quotation marks, denoting a string of text. So our hyperlink function takes text as inputs, and our power function takes numbers as inputs. What happens if we use the wrong data type with the wrong function? Well, let's find out. We return to our power function. Let's raise 2 to the power of test text. What happens if we do that? It gives us an error. Reason being, we've used the wrong data type for the wrong function. That's it for this video introducing Excel functions. We've covered what functions are, how to use them, and the types of inputs that can be used for functions. Over the course of this series, I'm going to go over each function Excel has with dedicated videos for each type of function. So if there is a function in particular that you need info on, you should be able to find it in my Excel functions playlist. Failing that, I'll leave a link to the support page I showed you earlier down in the description below. Thanks everyone for watching.